So it's 10:15. Good morning. Welcome. Today I will be talking about 10 key mistakes which I saw in our API docs and how to avoid them. To get started, I would like to do a small chat. Just talk to your neighbor once, like how far been so your experience in this conference. Just take a 1 minute, just chat with your neighbor, see what was your experience so far. It can be good experience, it can be bad experience. I want here you to have a chat. So I'm just gonna put a timer because I also have an experience. I just also want to share. Maybe you can talk. Maybe you can talk with your own. Thank you. I hope you shared some good and even some bad experience. So I also noticed some of the experience. Like for example, I don't know if you noticed it. I just nearby this road, I noticed that there's a look right, look left. Those are the kind of a guide for the pedestrians. I find out it's pretty cool. And also, there's a construction is going on in this building. So I saw that. I'm first time here. I got lost. So they showed that, hey, this is the entrance. I find this very, very useful. And similarly, like I don't have to go to ask reception. I know that where this conference is happening. So I know it's in the groundstairs. So, and also the entrance of this session room, you can also see where is what sessions are going on. I felt this is pretty cool. So this is kind of one of a very simple experience. We might not notice it, but it's going to be impacting how well this conference is going on. So again, kudos to the organizers. Thanks for this. So now let's move on to my talk. I worked recently on these companies. Like currently I work at Localize. It's a localization platform. And previously I was working at Contentful as a technical product manager and also at Commerce Tools. So my talk will be based on my observations on building products and supporting APIs for the developers. So let's get started. So for example, this one is from Localize. We built a developer portal for developers. So I noticed some of the challenges when you're building API docs for the developers, basically the customers. And I also got a lot of inspirations from other products. So I'll be sharing those inspirations, where I got those inspirations are. Hopefully you can take back those mistakes and take those inspiration from this talk and apply it to your day job. So the first one is skipping. The first mistake is, can you hear me? Okay, that's perfect. Okay, skipping feedback. So I see this is one of the missed opportunity. What I mean by missed opportunity is if you're not collecting feedback, if you're not providing a channel where a potential prospect or a potential developer wants to log something is broken, they're not going to come and tell you that, hey, your documentation is bad. There needs to be a channel. There needs to be an action item where you open up to collect the feedback from developers. So here is the example. I got inspired by Next.js. Anybody know Next.js framework? Okay, cool. So they have a good documentation, and I got inspired by there. Like you can just share a feedback, and they even had like email was optional. You can just give a feedback, and we just implemented the same thing at Localize. So instead of having a separate pop-up, I just had a Google form, and it has the same field, like an optional, like an email field if you wanted to contact or what feedback they want to give. With that, I regularly get a feedback from developers and those who are trying it out, and they say what's good, what's not good, what's working. With that, you're able to see what you can fix, what you can improve in your documentation. So that's a great opportunity to improve your API documentation. And in addition to this, using Google Form, what I did is there's an option in Google Form where you can select a get email notification when there's a new response. So I don't have to watch this. So as soon as there is somebody responds to this feedback, I get an email notification. And also what I did is, instead of me getting notification, I also got a notification for all my teammates so that they know that what feedback they're getting. So there's a possibility to configure in a spreadsheet. Second mistake is ignoring the diverse personas. What I mean by diverse persona is talking about not just thinking only as one persona is your API docs is used by only one persona. No, that's not true. Your persona can be anybody who's a senior developer, who is a junior developer. There could be a different persona, and also they will be working on a different programming language. They might be perfect in JavaScript. They might be a Java developer. What are we doing into it? Looking from your documentation from a different persona point of view. Look at your different sub-personas you can think about for your API documentation. And for example, Fastly documentation has, for example, in their solutions page, they have a category of code examples, tutorials, starter kits, and demos. As a product manager, I don't have time. I might not be comfortable in coding, so I might be taking a look into a demo, how this application works. And whereas as a developer, I might be more interested into see a tutorial, or I might be interested into a code example. Or if you're a junior developer, you might be interested in to know a step-by-step guide how to achieve that solution. So having that a different mindset of different personas gonna help you, and identifying those personas are very important. And another thing, just a quick quiz on us. What percentage of developers learn how to code? It can be on your API using how-to videos. This is a survey from Stack Overflow 2022. What do you think? How many of you think it's A, 25% of developers learn how to code using how-to videos? How many of you think A? What about B? How many of you think it's 59%? Okay, what about 10%? What about D, 95%? Okay, the answer is B. It's a 59%. And there's an enormous amount of YouTube tutorials, Udemy tutorials, and different tutorials are available where developers sometimes prefer to learn by seeing visually. There are different, so considering serving a video tutorial content along with your API docs is also important. And this is data from Stack Overflow. The other thing is, this is my favorite. This is where a lot of people get wrong. Applying user experience technique to developer experience. Let me tell you this analogy. What I mean by developer experience is not same as user experience. Imagine you're in a restaurant and you order a food and you get a food. That's an user experience. As a consumer, you are experiencing the restaurant. But whereas a developer experience is something as a cook, you use your developer tools and you build using those tools. So when you're serving your APIs to the potential customer or a developer, you're actually helping the cook. That's a developer experience. And you provided tools for the developer experience. And most of the case, you think that customers they might need this prepared food. But no, they don't want a prepared food. They want a food where they also need the ingredients, but they also need a guide on how to prepare. So it's on us as an API platform provider. We need to provide them a right recipe. We need to provide them the right documentation. We need to provide them the necessary information. And the fourth one is overlooking developer needs. Just providing API docs or API itself is not sufficient. We need to look from a developer needs point of view. How many of you know jobs to be done? How many of you are familiar with jobs to be done? Okay, only one. Okay, maybe it's okay. It makes sense to explain. So this is from a Theodore. People don't want a quarter-inch drill; they want a quarter-inch hole, right? If you apply this thing to developers, they might not be needing your API. They wanted to get some job done, identifying what is that job they're trying to get it done. Can I help them with our API? Can I make their life easier? So just to understand what I mean by that is jobs to be done, I'm going to give you a couple of examples. For example, if you look back at 20 years back ago, if you want to book a train ticket, you're going to go and stand in the physical information center and you get it. Now you don't do it because you get it from the mobile app. What about Netflix? You used to get it from CDs. Now you don't do it. You watch it on an online stream. Same thing for music. Same thing for the transportation, for example, Flexbus. So think about what is the next step. What is the next step you can take? What is the next jobs to be done? You can make the better. It can be using your API. What is the jobs to be done? A developer is trying to get it done. How can you make it better? Some of the example is, for example, this is from a Commerce Tools. Commerce Tools, we had an API and we have a SDK. As a developer, I prefer to spend my time on IDE, and I don't want to switch back to my SDKs, the documentation. I want to see what are the methods possible in my IDE itself. For example, this one is a TypeScript SDK, so you can get to read the more details about what API, what is possible, what parameters I can pass. So that makes me, as a developer, much more efficient. I can get my job done much more efficient. This one is from Xara. It's a serverless database. What they do is they go even one step ahead, and you can choose what action you want to do. You want to get a record, or you want to get an all record, and they provide you the ready-made JavaScript, TypeScript code snippet. You can just copy in your front-end code. You can execute it. They're cutting down, writing all the necessary code you need. I have the same example. So I think maybe this one is a better example. So the resolution is much nicer. So you can see that. So you can directly go and copy and execute it. And they're providing you the code snippet. You don't need to worry about the API. And they're providing you all the packages and code snippet to execute it. And the next mistake is, how can you make your experience delightful? How can you show the wow, aha moment of your API as quickly as possible without delaying it? For example, one quick example, as most of you know, you can run it on Postman. Just run the API documentation, click on one click. Maybe you add an API key and you just query it and you get a result. And similarly, at Localize Developer Hub platform, we provided a same option where it's not a Postman, but you can still, just entering an API token, you can execute it. Even though you don't have to have an API token, but if you look at the response, you can still see what's the response. You don't have to necessarily execute this code, but you can see the response. And also, some non-technical or junior developers or less technical developers might also want to see how this API works. And we are providing that video just to see what this endpoint is capable of doing. Another example is on Delightful, providing quick experiences, Next.js Commerce. If I wanted to try out this Next.js Commerce a template, I just have to clone and deploy. I just have to provide my GitHub account, and I just have to configure my API where I have to do. Like within a couple of minutes, I'm able to have this clone version. So how can I get your API? How can I get your platform API up and running? I wanted to test it out. Make that as quickly as possible. For example, this is from Fastly, and they have on the homepage developer documentation, you can directly run So you don't have to worry about it. Like you can just click on a run, it's going to execute it. So try to think about cutting down all the frictions to experience the delightful experience of your product. And they also have a lot of getting started ready examples where you can deploy it or you can play around it without quickly and also see the code examples. The other mistake is troubleshooting. A lot of developers go through this is an experience. This is a typical developer experience. When a developer trying to use it, they're going to read through a getting started guide, documentation and tooling, and there's going to be a lot of movement where they're going to fail. It might not be a perfect at first instance. So what are we doing? What are we doing how are we helping developers? One of the best example I've seen is Cypress, a testing tool, automation testing tool. And what Cypress does really well is when I'm testing out, if I see they notify there is something is broken, they also give me a link to read more details about what is this error, why it happened, how can I fix that? Are you considering those troubleshooting? Are you helping developers to troubleshoot? And here is for example, this is from the Cypress, and you can see here what is the error and what is the fix. So that definitely gonna make a greater experience for developers consuming your API. And there's also another really nice article about how to showcase the error message, even though it's more on a UX user experience, but it's still the principles. It also apply for developer tooling. For example, clearly specifying what happened, like why it happened, giving the reasoning behind it, helping them to fix it, like providing like what kind of assurance, like nothing you broke. So this is a great example. This is a great template we can use and apply if you wanted to provide more troubleshooting guide for your developers. And the next mistake is providing a support information, providing essential support information. What I mean by that is, okay, I'm trying out your API. Where can I get help immediately? Is that question already answered? Do you have a forum? Do you have a community? Having that community or having that forum is very important. For example, Sanity, a headless CMS, when somebody is starting to giving a try of their tool, they have one thing very common in a lot of their documentation is join Slack community so that you can get support and you can get asked questions. Maybe community members can answer it. So that's a great way to get a support from community along with the company. So do you have that community where developers can get inspiration and get work on it? So that's very important. And I think there was yesterday's talk from Jan also talked a lot about the use cases and also the capabilities. And this is one of the things I've also seen. Every company has their own terminologies. We, as a API provider, understand that it's very important. We need to explain, or give them the use cases and give them the terminologies where developers can understand and work on it, so they don't care about our terminologies. I want to tell a small story. It was like 8 years ago. It is very much related to this. This is a Berlin ticket machine. Do you know what is the reduced fare means? I also didn't know. What does the reduced fare means? So I was traveling. I was using like, okay, I assumed that it's a short distance travel. So I was traveling by purchasing this because I thought like there's nowhere it explained, but I was using it. I got to know until I got caught by a cop that I'm traveling with the wrong ticket and there's no information that reduced fare is for kids. So this is an example. I have to end up paying 40 euros. And this is an example, right? I'm purchasing a ticket, but it's like, I don't know, I don't understand. So that's why it's very important to look from an end user point of view. We use the right terminologies. And again, I used Jan slide yesterday. It was a very great talk. Like, it's very important, like, we might be referring our terminologies and our API specific ones, but very important that we talk in a user's point of view, what they're looking for. It's very important in our API documentation. And this is another great example from Berlin. Like during the COVID time, there was a 1.5 meter distance maintenance. They give this example. I felt it really nice, like where people can understand this, what 1.5 meters look like. And yeah, I felt like it's really nice to provide examples where everybody can understand. This is a great inspiration. Like, we can apply, how can we apply that in our API documentation, where we can talk to developers where they can understand their terminology, our terminologies, so they can comfortably use our API and get benefit quickly. And this is from OpenAPI. There is a great examples, like Jan's talk yesterday. They have a lot of templates and use cases. I don't have to worry. Like, I can search, and if I wanted to build some app, or if I want to consume their API, I have a lot of inspiration and a lot of examples to get with that. And think about, similar to the Fastly example, what are the examples, the real use case examples we can provide so that developers wanted to use your API can able to get the benefit quickly. And this is from, they also have OpenAPI. They also have ahead of a lot of customer stories, how these customers are already using OpenAPI, ChatGPT to their use cases. This is a great resource. And similar one, Sanity also has a showcase projects from a community. This is also a great way where you can showcase what your other developers or community developers are building using your platform and your APIs. So it's kind of a more like inspirational content. The last but one is missing community opportunity. Your API documentation can be open source, and you can get, if you provide a right way to contribute, it's possible to get a lot of contributions like, hey, your documentation is wrong, this can be better, and you can get a lot of pull requests to improve your documentation. And this is a great opportunity considering your documentation as open source, so your potential community developers can really contribute to your improving your documentation. And at Contentful, we had an open source. We have an open source design system called Forma36. And one thing we really did good at Forma36 community contribution is everybody who commits or contributes to the open source documentation, or even if it's a simple documentation, you see here, the contributions are from designer. They're just updating the documentation. They're making some small changes, and we just put a kind of a contributions. So this is a great way to encourage developers and community people to contribute to your project, and think about how well you can make your API documentation better by opening up your documentation to get a feedback and get contribution to those to improve. And this is my favorite. This is my last mistake what I've seen is not doing enough user testing. Not doing enough user testing of your API. Your API makes sense to you because you are the creator and you are familiar and you have a lot of bias on it. But are you doing enough user testing of it? There's a quote from Amy, like, if you want to know what a person really values, what they really suffer, what they really do, don't listen to their words, observe their actions. It's similar to if you go to a safari, you're just observing animals, and you're not just interacting or sharing your thoughts, but you're just observing animals. And if you do the same thing with a developer consuming your API, you're going to learn a ton of useful insights where they are struggling. And if you're thinking about why Stripe documentation is so good, they run a lot of internal hackathons before a major release of a feature. They go through a lot of feedback from internal employees and also beta testers or a community or a customer advocates. They get a lot of feedback before that API documentation goes live. Other thing you need to consider when you're doing a user testing of your API with your potential beta testers or community member or with your internal engineers, it's important to onboard your team as well. What I noticed is when I started doing this user testing with API, I understand the value. I was doing fine, but it was quite hard to convince our team that the value of it, and they were not able to kind of fully understand what I was doing. So what I did is, instead of me doing alone, I invited my teammates as a passive participant. They were observing what's happening. They were not interacting anything, but they were just observing the call. And drastically, after the call, they all agree that we need to fix this. This can be fixed very easily. And it was taking just a couple of minutes to agree. And we were able to fix many such changes. So having a team onboarding when you're doing the user testing is necessary. And I can recommend these two books, Don't Make Me Think and The Mom Test. The Mom Test gives you more asking your right questions, asking open-ended questions so that you can get what the tester is performing or thinking about it. And Don't Make Me Think gives you some of step-by-step action items you can do by yourself, the user testing very quickly. So I highly recommend these two books. Another technique you can do if you wanted to do get more feedback is friction lock technique. This is also done by Stripe. Every engineer joining a Stripe has to go through their documentation. They literally have to document all the good, bad experience they had with the documentation. And that documentation will be shared with the specific team. And they're going to take that as an input and improve their experience. So this is a great way if a new employee joining your company, if it's an engineer, so it's important that they go through, they have a fresh mindset, and they can provide you a lot of useful insights about what can be improved in your API documentation. Okay, I would like to end my talk by saying, this is from the Airbnb CEO. It was around the COVID time. They were pivoting their business ideas based on user or customer input. You don't need to have ideas to innovate. You need to be a good receiver of ideas. So I highly encourage you to do a lot of API user testing, building some applications together with your developers. You're going to open up, you're going to discover a lot of unknown areas you never thought about it. So that's a great opportunity. And one example I would like to conclude with is at Contentful, we were improving the documentation for a design system called Forma36. And while I was doing the user testing, we were spending a lot of time on improving the documentation on our docs, but we were not paying a lot of attention to TypeScript types. And when I was doing a pair programming with a user or a community user, I just observed that he was not at all looking into our documentation page, but he was checking everything, the types as in the IDE itself, and types is documentation. And that changed our focus on providing a proper types and a proper documentation for types, so that developers are much more efficient. With that, thank you very much. I'm open for questions now. Do you have any questions? Or do you have any questions on the remote? I'm happy to answer. Yeah. Okay, just for the remote participants, the question is, how do you make, there's a challenge in terms of getting a approval or buy-in from the team for user testing, running it regularly. So my answer is, this is also, again, inspired by Steve Cook's Don't Make Me Think. That's also my perception was when I was doing initially. But actually, if I look at how much time I spend, it's actually not that much. I actually take only for a specific API testing, I just need 15 minutes of a developer time and 15 minutes for analyzing it. So I just need a 30 minutes. And what's big challenge is getting testers. I don't want to test with the same user. That's a big challenge. This is out of the scope of this talk, where I talk a lot about community building. First, starting to help your community developer or prospect who is struggling and building relationship with them, and talking to customer success managers. They know that there are some developers who are ready to share the feedback, wanted to do some things. Their whole different rewarding system we can have. If you have a budget, you can do a lot more social media advertising about, we are looking for a usability testing, and these are the criterias. There are different way, but actually once you start doing it, it actually pretty fast. Like, for example, if I wanted to have some conclusion about, I have a dilemma if this is not the right. So I really also want to have a confidence when I do a user testing. I have a goal, if it's the right thing or not. I need to do at least 4 to 5, at least five user testing sessions to get a confidence. This is a problem, I should fix it. I will be able to do it in like a couple of hours if I have a very specific problem, well-defined problem, and that should be possible. Initially, it will take a lot of time, but once you know the process, like having a Google Docs, I also use a lot of tools like automation tools like Calendly. I know that this is my slot in my calendar in work session. This is slot for user testing. I have integration with Calendly with Zoom. So I run my sessions on Zoom. So usually I ask the participant to share their screen, and I make the recording of the screen. This is only for user testing purpose. And I used a lot of AI tools where we can analyze the results, like what are the areas we can improve. So that way, this process is much more smoother, and it's simpler than you think. It might be complicated. I'm happy to discuss more details if you want. I have a dedicated talk on that where I talk more about how to approach building from a community angle. And yeah. Any other questions? I don't see any questions on the remote. So then, thank you very much.